All right, welcome to the Bringing Nature Home series. I am Erica Prang. I'm the Director of Education at the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. And if you don't know us, we are a nonprofit located within the Shaker Parklands. We maintain about 20 acres of land, and you can visit our trails or visitor center for free year-round. For deeper engagement, you can volunteer with us or attend one of our programs like you're doing right now. So I'm excited to welcome you to the Bringing Nature Home series. This series is inspired by Douglas Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, in which Tallamy discusses the ecological benefits of native plants and how to consider the big picture when planning your garden space. At the Nature Center, our natural resources team and volunteers practice many of the concepts discussed in this book, things like considering the biodiversity of plants available to the pollinators, birds, and other wildlife native to our area. They also take steps to replace invasive species with native ones, essentially removing plants that offer little to no food, shelter, or other benefits to the local wildlife, and replacing them with a beautiful selection of native plants that offer the support our wildlife needs to thrive. So when you visit our trails or nature center, you're able to see the beauty of their work as well as the different wildlife those native plants attract. But these benefits are not limited to parks and restoration spaces. You make decisions in your own home and community gardens that impact our local habitats as well. And that's the big reason why I'm excited about this series, because we have our local experts like Steve Cagan this evening, who can teach us more about what this practice looks like at our own homes and green spaces. I want to extend a thank you to our partner, the Domebrook Watershed Partnership, and hand it over to Elizabeth to introduce her organization.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Smith. I'm the Watershed Programs Manager at Domebrook Watershed Partnership. We are a multi-stakeholder organization dedicated to the protection, awareness, and restoration of the Domebrook and its watershed. We accomplish this by educating the residents in our watershed via events and webinars like this one, as well as partner with local institutions to complete projects that promote a healthy waterway. Much of our work would not be possible without dedicated volunteers like the Friends of Lower Lake. If you'd like to learn more, please check out our website at www.domebrookpartnership.org. We have a couple events coming up, including this Saturday. We are going to be doing a trash pickup in Ambler Park, which is down the street. It is the middle around MLK going down toward Case, toward University Circle. So please, if you're interested, event registration is closed, but show up. Information is on our website from 12:30 to 3. Big thank you to our sponsors, including Independent Tree, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and the Sewer District for making the series possible for another year. And thank you, Nature Center, for partnering with Domebrook for another year of bringing nature home, where we can provide some insight and highlight some really cool local people who are doing good work with natives. And Erica, I'll let you introduce our speaker for the night.
Yes, so tonight's speaker, Steve Cagan, he's going to be presenting Will It Be Beautiful? A look through the year at the engaging beauty of a native flower garden. Steve is a member of the Nature Center's Native Plant Sale Committee, so he's part of the team that's helping the Nature Center actually plan our own native plant sale. And he's going to be at the sale on May 7th. So mark your calendars if you haven't already. But we are also in for a treat because Steve is also a photographer. And so many of the photos he's going to be sharing are ones, I'd imagine all of them are probably photos he took himself. Steve Cagan lives in Cleveland Heights, where with his wife, he has a small native flower and vegetable garden. During his presentation, he will be using his own garden as examples. And at the time he and his wife began planting, their gardens were one of the pioneer native gardens in the area. Steve has been photographing and exhibiting seriously since the mid-1970s. His major work is in what is often called documentary, but what Steve prefers to call activist or socially engaged photography. He's most concerned with exploring strength and dignity and everyday struggles of grassroots people resisting their pressures and problems. His avian photography and the images from the garden are the byproducts of a long-standing love of nature and birding. Steve has been involved in a major project since 2003, El Chocó, Colombia, Struggle for Cultural and Environmental Survival, documenting that threatened rainforest area and the special cultures there. Focus on daily life in Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities and the dangers posed by the violence of the civil conflict and development activities that threaten the rainforest environment and traditional cultures. Steve has exhibited and published photography on 4 continents. He has published reviews and critical writings in a variety of professional journals and books. Major awards include 2 Fulbright Fellowships, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and several Ohio Arts Council Fellowships and New Jersey Arts Council Fellowships. Steve taught photography at Mason Gross School of the Arts, Rutgers University from 1985 to 1993. And tonight he's here to show us some photos and guide us through considering aesthetics as we plan for our own garden. So Steve, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erica, and thank you to the Nature Center for having this program and for inviting me to be part of it. And thank you to everybody who's attending. We'll see how this goes. What I want to do this evening is to share some of the joy that we have had in that we've experienced from native gardening on our own. I'm interested in sharing our experiences, some of the fun we've had, and the beauty that we see in native flowers. Once, a naturalist from the Metro Parks came to our house, and he was amused by the mix of natives in our front yard. And I said that it turns out that our front yard is the very spot where the prairie meets the forest. And he thought that was an adequate explanation. I accepted that with a smile. The thing is that we're talking about gardens. We're not talking about nature preserves or wild areas, but we're really talking about gardens, and we make decisions about what we're going to do in our gardens. My wife, Beth, and I grew up in apartments in New York City, so we had no gardens. And after some years in Cleveland, when we started looking for a house, we knew that we wanted garden space. We started with a vegetable garden, and we began to plant perennials in our little front yard, and bit by bit, it filled up. But at one point, over 20 years ago, we had become serious birders. We were spending more time in the woods and the fields around here. And I proposed to Beth that we change our approach and start a native garden. And I'm going to see if we can, get our little show here. So when I proposed that to Beth, she asked a fairly obvious question. The question was, but will it be beautiful? And well, that's what we're going to see. We're going to look at some flowers tonight and see how beautiful it really can be, and what great aesthetic pleasure we can take from this. Just to set the scene, we have a typical smallish Cleveland Heights yard, and a backyard that's too much of which is taken up by the driveway. But we've had the very good fortune that our neighbors like our garden, so we have no problems with having a garden in the front yard. So what we're going to do this evening is take a quick look at some of the plants through the year. And remember that these pictures are all of plants in our garden, not other things that we've seen. And of course, we won't see all the plants in the garden. But what I want to do is to give you a tour of some of the delights that this kind of gardening can provide. I'm going through the year, but please keep in mind that plants actually don't keep the calendar. Sometimes they come earlier, sometimes later. Weather and other factors enter here into what happens. I'm going to show you a lot of plants, so I'm going to be sort of rushing through them, and I hope, and I'm going to be identifying them for you, and I hope I can answer questions that you might have them at the end. And finally, I want to say before we get started that you can only squeeze so much into one presentation. So I'm not going to talk about the very important and very attractive native shrubs and trees that add so much to a native garden. Tonight, it's all about flowers, what we call forbs, and a few other little things. So the year starts in January. January can be a hard month for gardeners. Mostly we're thinking and hoping about what's coming. But still, a close look can provide some real pleasures, some visual pleasures, even in what's left over from last year's garden and in the snow. And then there's February. You know, for the shortest month of the year, especially for gardeners, it can seem like it takes a long time to get through February. We're still waiting for things to go into a better direction, but we're also still looking because there are still always things to see. By March, we're really ready for things, for changes to come, right? We want those changes. And sometimes we start to wonder if spring is ever going to return, and then optimism returns, along with some pretty courageous flowers. This is a bloodroot growing up through the snow. When it's a warm, sunny day in March, the bloodroot gets a real start. Actually, this is in the front is ginger. So that's, I didn't realize that was in that picture too. That's really nice too. Broadleaf sedge has survived green all through the winter. It's very nice. And the cattail catkins in our tiny little pond in the backyard have waited all winter and start to spread their seeds. So we see things are beginning to happen in March, and it's very nice. And there are really things, part of what I'm trying to emphasize here is that there are things to look at all the time. There are things constantly. And then in April, things really start to emerge and to bloom for real. And our hearts also open up and leap up as we start to seeing these things. Ferns start to send up rather tender shoots and fiddleheads right now. The blue flag iris begins to send up shoots. And then we have some early flowers. This is cutleaf toothwort, an early spring ephemeral, as it's called. And the May apples, if you have them in the garden, you notice that they're not quite open up yet, but the leaves emerge in April, and so do the flowers of May. And then remember that bloodroot, that so courageous bloodroot. Now it's bloodroot is really blossoming, and it's also showing its foliage, which is really a beautiful leaf, and which stays with us pretty much the entire summer. And more spring ephemerals now. I mean, we actually are in April now, right now, and we begin to see all of these things. Virginia bluebells and trilliums. You know, we all love trilliums, and sadly, of course, the deer also love the trilliums. But trilliums are wonderful flowers. This is a great white trillium, and this is sessile trillium. We start getting flowers of marsh marigold, which doesn't have to be in a real marsh. It likes wet soil. And we get trout lilies in the garden. One of the gifts that we get from native gardening is that we begin to see the beauty in small plants and small things, like the moss that grows on the rocks next to our little pond, or even small flowers like Dutchman's breeches, or hepatica, or even the flowering of the sedges, the early flowering of the sedges. This is also broadleaf sedge that we saw before. Honestly, I think one of the benefits that we've derived from native gardening is just to be more observant. To see and enjoy more of our surroundings. We actually look for some of the same plants when we're out in the woods. And it's similar to one of the benefits that we've really gotten from birding, you know, that you begin to see things and to take such delight in those things. This is the toothwort again. By the end of April or the beginning of May, other spring ephemeral flowers have emerged, sometimes in April, sometimes in May, but we'll put them in May for now. Solomon seal, a wonderful plant. Unfortunately, another one that the deer really love, but it's a great plant. Shooting stars, wild geranium, which makes a nice ground cover too. Jack in the pulpit, our native columbines. These are all plants that are native to our area, and that unfortunately, because of what's happening in our woods, we don't see as nearly as much as we used to. And golden alexanders. And in April, we get into some later spring plants like wild hyacinth. One place you can see wild hyacinth in the wild is in the, I've seen huge fields of this down in the valley in the national park. A wonderful plant. And now the ferns are really coming out, especially late in April. Cinnamon fern on the left and royal fern on the right. And one of the things we look forward to is our native roses. This is a Carolina rose or a pasture rose. And we start to see things in a different way. Instead of having huge and doubled rose flowers, what we see is delicate rose flowers that only last a day or two and then keep coming for a couple of weeks. And we enjoy them while we can get them. And I think they're quite beautiful, but it's a different kind of aesthetic from the cultivated roses. Another spring delight is foam flower. That actually we do see it in the woods as well. And by the end of April, the ragworts are fully out. This is a golden ragwort. Golden ragwort has a great advantage, which is that it's the flowers last for quite a while, but the foliage lasts year round. It stays green under the snow, and this spreads pretty well. So it makes a very good native ground cover for people who are looking for ground covers, right? And while speaking of ground covers, this is the time also when our wild sedum flowers. These are tiny flowers. They're I think very, very beautiful. We have other plants too, the Greek valerian, or sometimes called Jacob's ladder. The tall red trillium comes, and the native irises. This is blue flag iris, a very beautiful plant. And, you know, people pass by and they ask us, you know, where did you get that plant? And we said, no, this is a plant that grows in Ohio. This is a plant that's ours. You know, this is it's very dramatic. It's a little bit bigger flowers than some of the others. And then in our little pond, things are also starting to come to life, like sweet flag, very perhaps slightly unusual, but not hard to find a plant. In the rest of the garden, the various violets, and I love this because there are white violets and there are pink violets, and you think with the name violet that it should be they should all be violet colors, but they're not. This is one of two common white violets we have in our area. This is Canada. Bowman's root is also lasts for a while in April. A very attractive flower, I think. And then some flowers are still just developing. So this is starry false Solomon's seal, and it's just the flowers are still in bud. They're not. They haven't bloomed yet. We'll see them later. But the garden in April is filling out, and it's giving us the delight of contrasting shapes, of different sizes, of different colors. And this is important because dense and varied plants are not only great to look at, but they're also important for the health of the plants themselves and for the health of the wildlife that visits the garden. And for that matter, for our health, right? And talking about wildlife, one of the things that we get in April is amphibian love. So this is American toad in our little tiny garden in the back. Well, in June, for us, June means summer, and summer plants start coming in. This is harebell. It's a bellflower that actually is circumpolar. It can be found in Europe and North America and Asia, and we were delighted to see some of it a few years ago in the United Kingdom. We have our native evening primrose, and then we have the monardas, which lots of people like for very good reasons, I think. The one on the left is bee balm, the red one, and the lilac one is wild bergamot. And these are both very attractive to all kinds of pollinators, very important. And then we have native lilies. And I really do want to stress how the joy of getting these native lilies to appear in the garden. This is Canada lily, and this is Turk's cap lily. We have a third lily that called Michigan lily. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of it because the deer got to it before I did. We have a variety of Liatris or gay feather, which are native in our area. And one of the real favorites of the hummingbirds is trumpet vine. If you're thinking about trumpet vine, I'll just give you some advice. We have it growing up a dead tree. That's much better than having it grow out of your on the side of your house, because it is pretty destructive to your paint, unlike on other vines. Right? And we have a couple of anemones. Anemones, you know, are wind flowers. That's what the word means. And this is a Canada anemone, which is very common around here. We also have what's called the thimble flower or Virginia anemone here. And for us, they've simply taken the place of the Japanese anemones that are in the more exotic gardens and that are much more common in the nurseries. Black cohosh, a terrific plant which is used also in traditional medicines, and probably the most dramatic sedge is graze sedge, and these seed pods are just very, very dramatic. I think we get baptisia at this time. Starts coming out. It's also called false indigo. There's a white version of it as well. Old man's beard. And one that is very commonly sold at nurseries is Ohio spiderwort. And then the penstemons. Now, there's lots of penstemons that are sold that are not the native species, or they're cultivars of the native species. But if you get the natives, they're so attractive, I think. This is what's called foxglove beard tongue, and this is hairy beard tongue, two of our native penstemons. There are others as well. And then there are grasses, and the grass that we have really come to love in the garden is called bottle brush grass, for obvious reasons. And by late April, it's putting out these flowering units, which will become the seeds. And the nice thing about this grass is that it does very well in the shade as well as in the sun. It does very well everywhere, right? And we're still, even in April, we're looking for very small flowers, like blue-eyed grass, which is not a grass, but it's called blue-eyed grass because of the shape of these leaves. And the pond is growing. We have arrowhead or a duck potato on the left, and pickerel weed on the right. And the pond is now hosting another amphibian. This is a green frog. Remember that starry false Solomon seal that was developing last month? Well, now it's out and it's flowering, and it's a very lovely flower as well, I think. So many of these flowers last well into July, but what I'm going to do now is just show a few that normally only develop and blossom in July or sometimes in late June. The milkweeds have attracted a lot of attention recently because of their importance to monarch butterflies and other pollinators, but especially monarch butterflies, especially the common milkweed, which that word common, there's nothing common about it. It's just we have that in birding too. Butterfly weed, not butterfly bush, but butterfly weed is another, I think, very attractive milkweed that we have. And probably my favorite milkweed of the three most common ones that we have in this area, and also a favorite of large butterflies, is swamp milkweed. It's I think it's a spectacular spectacular kind of flower. This time of year, we also start looking for the taller plants to start showing off, like the Joe Pye weeds. We have a couple of different species of Joe Pye weeds in our area, and if you look at the two stems, you'll see that the stem on the left is smooth and the stem on the right is spotted. And those are two different species of Joe Pye weed. And I mean, this is one of the things that happens when you're a native gardener. You start seeing these differences. You start seeing these interesting and really attractive aspects of plants that, as I said, require some attention. There are other tall plants that are going now. Culver's root, rattlesnake master. One of our favorites is green-headed coneflower, sometimes called cutleaf coneflower. This is a very great favorite of goldfinches in the fall once it goes to seed, and lots of goldfinches eat their seeds. We love that too. And cut plant, a tall plant that's very attractive to a number of species of large butterflies. There's also tall larkspur. And we're still in the tall plants, Fragrant raspberry. Now, fragrant raspberry doesn't give an edible fruit that I'm aware of, but it does give these beautiful and fragrant flowers. The other bellflower that we have here, tall bellflower, this is a self-seeding plant that keeps coming back. It's very nice. And then we have some very, I think, very attractive medium height flowers, because this allows people to think about their garden, to think about, well, we can put tall flowers in the back, and we can put medium flowers in the middle, and some of them are very very lovely. This is fringed loosestrife. There's that perennial favorite, and this one you can get in the nurseries. Purple echinacea, also used a lot in traditional medicines. And another favorite of mine is nodding onion. And this isn't a real onion. It's in the same genus as the onions we eat, and it has all the plants in that genus, which include ramps and garlic and so forth, have the advantage that deer don't like them. They don't like these strong plants. And then the lobelias. On the right, we have great blue lobelia, and on the left, another plant that's very attractive to hummingbirds. We do see hummingbirds go to this plant to get nectar. Is cardinal flower. Also a relatively available plant. Now, lots of people know about ramps. Ramps are sometimes called wild leek. They grow in profusion in some of the woods around here, and they're delicious, and we eat a lot of them. But we also we've planted a lot of them in our garden to kind of discourage the deer a little bit. And at the end of April, they put up this little flower. Most people who eat leeks don't know about the flower, but it's a nice one. Well, for gardeners, in August, the summer starts to wind down, and later flowers become more dominant. But again, depending on conditions, some of these may have started earlier, and some of them have lasted longer from the earlier plants. Although taller plants really are beginning to dominate now, there are some shorter flowers that we really love, like white turtlehead, black-eyed Susan. Sunflowers become very important in this period. This is one of our favorite sunflowers. It's called downy sunflower. Wingstem. Wingstem will spread a lot, even where you don't want it, but it's very easy to pull up. The wild senna begins to blossom late in the summer, and as well as ironweed. This is a very tall plant, ironweed. The ironweed in our garden reaches 7 or 8 feet up. And one of the plants we really like that gives us a lot of pleasure in the garden is our native clematis, which is called Virgin's Bower. And the flower is nice, the leaves are nice, but what's really nice is the clouds of white flower that grow on these vines. Virgin's Bower. The late summer also gives us some interesting and attractive invertebrates as well. I have to show you this wonderful orb weaver spider. Lots of people are horrified or frightened of spiders, and I really want to emphasize that they contribute both aesthetically to the garden, to our experience in the garden, but also they contribute to the health of the garden by preying on some sucking insects. Well, September for gardeners is the beginning of the fall, maybe a little earlier than other people. Remember that lovely pasture rose. This is the rose hips. We haven't eaten these rose hips, but they're supposed to be very filled with vitamin C. And, you know, in New England, people make rose hip jellies out of bigger rose hips from beach species. The jack of the pulpit is now producing attractive seeds. So is the elderberry, practically the only shrub that I'm showing you today. Lovely seeds. And the American spikenard also produces really sort of a very attractive seeds. And of course, one of the things that's nice is these seeds aren't just attractive to us, they're attractive to birds and to insects, and a lot of activity goes on at this time of year. We still have some plants that are blossoming, like bottled gentian or spotted jewelweed, also called touch-me-not. But this is the time when we really are enjoying more the sunflowers and even more the goldenrods and the asters. Goldenrods and asters. There are huge varieties of these plants. The goldenrods that we see quite commonly in gardens around here or in the fields are Canada goldenrod, blue stem goldenrod, which has the advantage that it really likes the shade more than the sun. For a lot of us garden in the shade, and zigzag goldenrod also tolerates the shade very well. And asters come in even more varieties than goldenrods. One of my favorites, very easy to grow and to spread, is flat top aster. It's also taller than most of the asters. On the left is a heartleaf aster, and on the right, sky blue aster. Big leaf aster. Now, this is the most common aster that we see mostly in gardens, and various varieties of this are sold in the nurseries. This is New England aster, but this is also a native plant in this area. And another one of my favorite asters is smooth aster. And then, not to be ignored, is a plant that imitates the the asters. This is not an aster. This is Boltonia, or false aster. And actually, its species name is Asteroides, which means like asters. And then, talking about wildlife and insects that are attracted to all these plants, here's one of everybody's favorite migrants, the monarch butterfly. And I show it in part. This is on ironweed. And I show it in part to remind us that it's not just about whether animals or insects feed at a plant, but whether they're getting all the nutrition they need, and whether all the phases of the life of this animal are supported by those plants. It's a much bigger question. And many of the plants that they go to really aren't supporting reproduction as well as the natives that they've co-evolved with. Well, in October, autumn starts closing up, and many of the plants are actually similar to what we've seen in September. We're enjoying the same kinds of plants. I can't forbear, I just can't not show you another picture of flat top aster, because it's a plant that I really love and does very, very well. Very strong plant in this area. It spreads very well. And then sometimes we get a little taste of what's to come. Although, everything is still green, so we don't give up yet. But there's we get a sense of what's coming a little bit. And winter really is, for gardeners, winter really begins in November, but we still have some good plants and some good flowers. This is lance-leaved coreopsis, one of our 3 native coreopsis in this area. A very, I think, a very beautiful, it's not a sunflower, but it looks like a sunflower, right? And by November, some of the plants are giving us the pleasure of seeing how they organize dispersion, how they're developing their leaves, and thinking about diffusing their leaves. And then they're not thinking about it, but they're doing it. This is swamp milkweed, and it continues to be beautiful even when it's at the end of its season. Of course, in November we really can have snow, and But then there's an advantage, it can be an advantage to the snow, because even as the trees are preparing for winter, the snow can provide a nice background for seeing the color of the leaves. Well, December, we're coming to the end of the calendar, and we think back over the year and we start looking forward to next year and wondering if we're going to make it through January. Still, the garden rewards close looking. There's a lot to be seen. But really our year has ended. So we get back to that question that we started off. Will it be beautiful? We think that the answer is yes. You know, sometimes it may sound like we who are promoting native gardening are saying that it's someone's duty, their obligation to join us. I'm not interested in saying that so much. Way before that, it's a way of producing gardens with a special beauty. It's interesting to me that passersby often comment on our garden. And even we've had people ask us if it's okay if they take pictures of the flowers in our garden. And of course, we're very happy for them to do them. Now, if you're thinking about starting native gardening, obviously you can't start with a fully developed and mature garden as like what we have over really about almost 2 decades, I think. The trick is, for most people, is to start with a few plants and to expand every year. Maybe you start with some tall plants to put on the edge, the back edge of your garden or near your house. These are, for instance, two very easy to find and easy to grow plants. The sunflower is a woodland sunflower. It's a woodland sunflower, but it likes the shade. And blue vervain, the other one. These are very good starters. 2 places that are very good to get good perennial native plants are the 2 plant sales of the Nature Center. Saturday, May 7th, 8:30 to 9:30 is a members preview, and then from 9:30 until early afternoon, we have a sale. I recommend that you come early because people come and they buy a lot of plants, and the selection is much better earlier in the morning, 9:30 or 10:30. And then on Saturday, June 11th, we have our homegrown sale where local gardeners donate plants, mostly, again, native plants, to that have the great advantage that they've grown up in this area, they've been here, and then we who work as volunteers in these sales know about these plants and are able to really explain them and what they need and how to plant them. They're great places to get plants, and they're also great places to have conversations about gardening, to learn things, to have your questions answered, and we try to do that. And with that little promotion of our of our plant sales, I'm going to end, and I hope I can answer some questions.
We do have a couple comments in the chat. Barbara says, it's so helpful to me to review what all the plants are. I have many of these, but I'm still learning to distinguish between them. Thanks, Steve.
Hi, Barbara. You know, it's one of the things one of the issues that came up for us early on in this activity was in the spring. We have two things that are happening at once. One is that these little plants are starting to peek through the soil, and it's very exciting. It's actually very we find it thrilling, you know. And then it's at the same time there are these weeds that are growing, and that we want to pull up so that they don't compete with our plants. Well, how do you recognize the baby plants you want from the baby weeds? So we started being pretty serious about labeling the plants so that when they come up the next year, we can recognize them. Now we recognize a lot of them anyway, but that took some effort. So Barbara, we're all continuing to try to learn all these plants and what they are and the care they need. So thanks for that comment.
There is another comment about closed captioning, and I actually replied to that one in the chat, but I just wanted to highlight Rachel's comment, because if anybody knows closed captioning resources, I know YouTube offers free automated ones, but it's only for short videos, so our presentations are too long. But I put my email in the chat, so if you know anything about how the Nature Center might be able to add closed captioning to other recorded presentations in the future, please email me directly. My email's in the chat, but I'd love to hear more if anyone knows.
Suzanne has a question. Is swamp marigold invasive? No, absolutely not. It's a native, it belongs here, but I think it can be very easily confused with a terrible native that we're struggling with all the time here, which is lesser celandine. And part of the reason it can be confused is because it's a low plant. The foliage comes out quite early, and then even the yellow flowers come out early. But it's not at all. I mean, the marsh marigold is not at all an invasive. If you see lesser celandine, and you know, maybe we can arrange to have something posted on, you know, on the webpage of the Nature Center, because if you see it, and it really is taking over parks and so forth here. But like I just was walking yesterday, and I noticed a little bit of it in some of my neighbors' yards. And when there's just a little bit of like that, then you can pull it up, you know, and it's a terrible problem because it mats. It's not just that it's not native, but it mats, and it really prevents other plants, important plants, from growing. So the bees fall asleep for the night on the blossoms of my obedient plant. Oh, wonderful. That's great.
Any other questions or comments? You can type them in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute and just ask it, you're welcome to. Steve, I have one, since I'm going to jump in.
Good.
You mentioned deer several times in the presentation. Could you give us a recap on a couple of deer-resistant flowers that you showed us today?
Yeah, well, it's very funny because, you know, one of the things is if you look at most of the deer in our neighborhoods here, unlike the deer in the overpopulated groups of deer in the forests, they have so much food. You know, they really look strong and healthy, and so they tend to pass by some of the things that in the woods they just gobble up, like the trillium. We thought last year, I thought a wonderful growth of white trillium that we had was being eaten by a deer, until I finally saw that it was actually a chipmunk that was eating it. So, if you look, if you go onto the catalog of our plant cell, we indicate by which of those many plants are deer resistant. That's as much as you can say. It's like water resistant. Nothing is deer proof, right? But they do like the lilies a lot. They don't like things that tend to be very fragrant, like all of the genus allium, which is the genus of onions and garlic and so forth. They don't like those. So that and there's lots of attractive plants in there. They don't seem to like the sedges very much. They for some reason they in our garden, at least, they don't do much damage to the asters or the goldenrods in the fall, and in the spring, it's interesting. But the bloodroot doesn't seem to be affected by them, and the geraniums, which are such a very nice plant, don't seem to be affected by them. So the ones we've had the most deer problems from are the lilies and the Solomon seals and the two species of false Solomon seals. And that's a shame, because those are among the most beautiful and dramatic plants that we have. But so be it.
Steve, there's a possible solution for some of the plants that deer really love. I read that one of the bushes that I bought from the Nature Center, which is called sweet shrub, I think it's also called Carolina sweet spice. The deer hate it so much that if you plant something very close to it that the deer love, they will avoid that too. They're so repelled by the smell.
Yeah, well, as I said, they don't like strong smells. So, and sweet shrub also is a beautiful flowering shrub as well.
Yes, yes, it is.
I don't
it
know
smells
if we have it
beautiful
this year, but it's a very nice plant.
Yeah, you're not offering it this year, but the year that you offered it, I bought one and I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, it's a great shrub. It's a great shrub. Yeah.
The other thing that might be helpful is Prairie Nursery Catalog. I don't know if you can see this. This lists all the native plants in it, and every plant has symbols to tell you whether or not it's deer resistant.
It's Prairie Nursery. You can just go to prairienursery.com
Exactly. And you can find, and in the back of the catalog, they even have lists of plants and shrubs that deer will avoid. So it's a great catalog.
Yeah, there are a number of catalogs. Prairie Nursery is one, and it just escapes me right now. But there are some of these bigger nurseries have really become very responsible about educating as well.
Yes.
It's very good.
Yeah, I was very happy to find this catalog.
Yeah, no, it's a nice catalog. It's a nice catalog. There was a question about the name of the companion to the woodland sunflower. That was blue vervain, Vervain. Nice, also a nice plant. Yeah.
And that big link I put in there is the Prairie Nursery website.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, there's a link to the Nature Center plant sale.
The other one I was trying to remember is called Prairie Moon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Prairie Moon.
Prairie Moon actually sends out a native flower lovers guide every year, as well as their catalog. They do two catalogs. So yeah, Prairie Moon, very also very responsible in education. Oh, good. Rachel Shansu asked about a wildflower. Here's what I suggest. Right now, we're in the middle of a wonderful institution in Northeast Ohio that's been going on for about 80 years or maybe more than 80 years, which is the Spring Audubon Bird Walks. And the last three Sundays of April and the first three Sundays of May, and they're in lots of places, but one of the places that we go to is the Nature Center in Shaker Lakes. 7:30 in the morning. It's free, and we see some nice wildflowers, especially in a week or two. We'll see some really nice native flowers on that walk. Will Steve share his email so I can send a photo? Yes. Yes, I'm very happy if I can identify it. I'll be happy to do that. I'm sort of an expert on the flowers I know, but my email is very easy. It's steve@stevecagan.com. So please, feel free to send me whatever questions or you have.
I'll send you a picture of my bee sleeping in my obedience.
Oh, I'd love to see that. That would be great.
So delightful.
That's wonderful. You know what else sleeps on the leaves at night? That's less delightful is the mosquitoes. They sleep under the leaves because they're not so good at night, most of them, most species. Good.
Hey, Steve, it's Rachel Shantz. I thank you for the information about the Audubon bird walk.
Oh,
But
good.
the only way I'm going to do 7:30 anything is by staying up all night. So that's why I thought, it's really pleasant to go out, especially this time of year when not only is there an abundance of wildflowers, but it's also pretty temperate, like about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So,
Well, maybe we can talk. I can talk with the Nature Center staff and see what we can do.
that would be so great. And Erica, if that happens, you need to find a way to let all the participants to that, because for some of us, we don't have gardens. We live in condos or whatever. And so the only opportunity to see them and to see them with somebody who knows what they're looking at, again, pure joy. So just keep it in mind. Thanks, both of you.
Absolutely. I'll make a note of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one. A few years ago in the fall, I took a picture of a bald eagle in the lower Shaker Lake. It
Yep.
came out beautifully. Is there some place I could send that picture to for others to see?
Mm-hmm.
The birding online, listservs and so forth mostly don't accept pictures. But what you might think about doing is there's this wonderful institution called the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, right?
Right.
And they run an online service called eBird.
Yep.
And on eBird, and you don't have to pay any
Right.
money. You can open up an account on eBird, and there you can submit photos.
Okay,
So it might be a good place to do that.
all right. I just wondered if Shaker Lakes Nature Center was interested in having pictures taken around the nature center, because it wasn't that far away.
In
Yeah,
general, they are.
If you have one, you can email it to me. I put eBird in the chat first, and now is my
It's in the chat?
email coming. Ooh, words.
We'll post it on our
Yeah.
Facebook if you want to send it.
So where is it in the chat?
Oops, I don't look at that one. I just typed my email incorrectly. Oh my goodness. You can tell it's getting late.
Oh,
Okay, it's praying@shakerlakes.org. And if you send it to me, I can forward it to Elizabeth from Don't Brook Watershed Partnership and the Nature Center's marketing team so that they can all take a look.
Okay, praying, Prange at shakerlakes.org.
Oh, and Elizabeth put her email in the chat.
I'll also take it.
there
Thank you.
go.
What a nice offer.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to share this picture because it was just the most beautiful thing to see at the
And-
lower lake.
And it's always worth it to think about how the fact that bald eagles are coming back so strongly in Ohio and in other places as well is the result of people doing something about environmental issues. And,
Right.
I mean, they're here because largely because of the stimulus of Rachel Carson's Island Spring, but
Right.
people worked against DDT,
Right.
and
Right.
successfully worked against DDT, and
Yeah.
so that it's a reminder of how important and how successful struggles around environmental issues can be.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing this presentation with us. I think we all enjoyed it a lot. I know I did. I loved all the photos and the
Good.
conversation at the end. This was wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This was the last Bringing Nature Home talk of the series, but again, it has been recorded and it will be posted on the website probably within a week. And if you missed any of the other talks, you can go back and watch those. And mark your calendars for May 7th. You can come visit Steve and the rest of the Native Plant Sale Committee at the plant sale itself.